Hello, everyone, and welcome to the annual Intelligence Day webinar from the Nordic Mensa Fund. This is our fourth webinar, and we have a very exciting program for you all this evening. My name is Janne Sylvest. I am the chair of the Nordic Mensa Fund, and I will do a brief introduction here before we get to our distinguished speakers for the evening. But first, just a few words about the fund. The Nordic Mensa Fund is a foundation that it was established 5 years ago in 2020 by the 4 national Mensa associations of Sweden, Denmark, Finland, and Norway. And the purpose of the foundation is to support research into the characteristics, nature, and uses of human intelligence, which is actually the second purpose of Mensa. So this is a joint project by 4 countries. I won't go too much into detail. Mensa has 3 purposes. One is to identify human intelligence. One is to encourage research, what we're doing here. And the third one is to provide a stimulating environment for its members, which is what we usually do when we get together. But here we're focusing on the research. What we always do at these events is that we ask for money. We are mostly funded by the national Mensa organizations of those of the 4 Nordic countries who are involved. But we also take donations from you guys. The more money we can get, the more research we can support. So if you have your phone nearby, use the QR code you see here, or you can go to our webpage, the Nordic Mensa Fund, and find donations. So I will show you this one at the end. We always take every opportunity we can to ask for donations for the foundation so that we can do more. But to the program for this evening. First of all, we have 2 of the former grantees and from the foundation. We have Karen Hopmann, who is assistant professor and a PhD candidate from the Department of Psychology at the Arctic University of Norway. And she will talk about executive functions and processing speed in adults, the role of depression and adverse childhood experiences. And then we will have Petri Kajonius, who's a senior lecturer and researcher at the Department of Psychology from Lund University in Sweden. And he will talk about the hidden dynamics, how personality interacts with intelligence, and vice versa, insights for the aware mind. And about the practicalities, Karen will present first, followed by Petri. You will have the opportunity to write questions for us. We have some technicalities which make it difficult for a direct dialogue, but if you write any questions that pop into your mind during the presentations or after, I will put the questions to Karen and Petri, and we hope we can have a bit of a little debate afterwards. I'm very much looking forward to this. We have put the headline, The Intelligent Mind, for these 2 presentations. Last year, we talked about the aspects related to education. So we're very happy that this year we can look into how does an intelligent mind work and what are the different aspects of that. So I think that's enough from me. Let's go to the program. Let's go to Karen Hopmann, and I will stop sharing so that Karen can put up her presentation. Thank you, and go ahead, Karen.
Okay, let's see. Here we go. Do you see my screen?
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Let's see. I just need to find my screen. There we go. Let's see over here. Okay. Yes. Hi, everyone, and thanks to the Nordic Mensa Fund for inviting me to this webinar. My name is Hopmann, and I'm working as an assistant professor at the Arctic University of Norway in Tromsø. And right now I'm doing a PhD project, which is partially funded by the Nordic Mensa Fund. A little bit about my background. I'm originally from Germany, but I did my bachelor and master studies in psychology in Maastricht University in the Netherlands before I moved to Tromsø up in the high north in northern Norway, where I now live with my family. The title of my presentation today is Executive Functions and Processing Speed in Adults, the Role of Depression and Adverse Childhood Experiences. And the title of my overall PhD project is Neuropsychological Function, Childhood Trauma and Vulnerability of Depression, a 25-year follow-up study. Let's see. First, I would like to talk a little bit about the larger project, the PhD project, before showing you some preliminary findings. Right now, we are in our final stage of data collection. We actually only have 2 people left, which we need to test, and we will start analyzing our data soon. And ultimately, this will result in 3 papers and a dissertation over the next 2 years. And there is a lot of data in this project, and my colleagues already have published 19 articles in this project and former data of the project, and there's much more to investigate. So this is just a small piece of it, and much more to come in the future. I would like to start with a quick note on terminology. As I imagine that Mensa mainly uses the word intelligence, but in neuropsychology, so my field of study, we usually don't use the word intelligence itself that often. So we mostly use cognitive abilities or cognitive functions. And I will also use other terms in my presentation, such as neuropsychological functions, which both include intelligence, but also other higher cognitive functions. So I will also talk about other specific domains, such as working memory, processing speed, etc., which are all somehow connected to intelligence, but they are different terms and different words, which I'm going to use also in this presentation. So first of all, a quick overview and introduction of my fellow colleagues on this project. So these are my fellow researchers and supervisors who are involved in my PhD project. So I would like to start with letting you imagine 2 people. And those 2 people, they have the same education, they have the same IQ, they have the same job. And on paper, they look identical. But then one of them develops a clinical depression. And that is something that can happen to anyone. Their IQ hasn't changed, their education hasn't disappeared, and they may even still be at work at the same time. But suddenly, everyday tasks will become difficult for the one person who is having a depression. It will be difficult for him or her to remember meetings, to returning phone calls, keeping track of important arrangements and other things. So while intelligence may stay the same, depression can affect how the brain actually works in everyday life, and also how depression can disrupt our cognitive functions. And that is exactly what I'm going to focus on my research. So there are a lot of studies about prevalence, but one Norwegian study found that up to 10% of Norwegian women and up to 4% of Norwegian men will be affected by depression at one point in their lives. And that is why it is so important to study depression and its consequences. And of course, there are different numbers. Some might be higher, some might be lower, but still 10%, that's a very high number. And depression is a tremendous burden for the individual who is affected, and it has a high prevalence rate. It has a tendency to recur, and there are a number of consequences for the individual itself, or the families around the individual, but also for society in general. So in my PhD project, we are looking at long-term effects of depression. And we are conducting a longitudinal study which looks at the state of depression and its influence on cognition and memory and other cognitive functions. So people suffering from depression, they have been found to have problems with attention, with concentration, with memory, cognitive tempo, executive functions, cognitive flexibility, and other higher functions. So we want to dive into this, and we use a test battery and questionnaires and clinical interviews to assess cognitive and executive function, memory, trauma, mental health, and other things. And we divided the participants into 3 groups. One group who has a current depression, so they are having a clinical depression while they are tested. Then we have one group who has experienced at least one clinical depression during lifetime, but are not depressed at the moment of assessment. And then we have the healthy control group, so those people who have never been depressed during their life. And that is then a clinical depression, so a diagnosed depression. As I said, this is a longitudinal study, so this study started a long time ago when I was 10 years old, so long before my time. My now supervisor started her PhD journey in the 1990s, late 90s, and recruited 149 participants to participate during that time. And they were tested with a lot of different tests back then. The same participants were followed up at the second time point, T2, with another PhD project where they tried to recruit the same participants coming back, being retested. 115 of 149 came back, and they also recruited some new participants to have enough participants to participate at T2. And now at T3, so this is my PhD project, we contacted all of those who participated at T2, and we have about 100 people of those came back to be tested at T3. So we are quite happy with how many people actually said yes to participate a second or third time in this assessment. So that's another discussion, but we were discussing of why do people want to come back? Why do they actually think it's important to contribute to this kind of research? And yeah, we can discuss that later, but we think it's good that people find it meaningful to participate in this kind of clinical studies. So our original research questions were, does memory impairment in depressed individuals persist over time? And does neuropsychological function change as a result of changes in depression status? And is the relationship between neuropsychological function and depression dependent on childhood trauma? And what role plays the type of trauma? The trauma questions are new in this assessment round. So in T1 and T2, the first 2 rounds, trauma wasn't assessed. We did that now in the third and last round. But all the others are connected. So I'm not quite sure how familiar you are with neuropsychological assessment tests, but I just wanted to show you a list of tests we are using. For some of those you are familiar with those, some of you might not have seen them at all. I don't want to go into detail into all these tests, but this is just a broad set of tests we are using to assess different neuropsychological functions and also mental health. And as you can see below, we are also screening for hearing impairment. And as you can imagine, this is the third round. A lot of people started in the 1990s as adults already then. So 30 years later, a lot of participants are older. So hearing declines with age, and we are also checking hearing then for all participants. So why do we do this research? Of course, we want to get new knowledge concerning cognitive and neuropsychological vulnerability factors to maybe prevent onset and recurrence of depression. We want to understand mechanisms underlying depression and the development of therapies, rehabilitation, and other things. And also, we think that we have a kind of unique study because we could not find any previous studies with this extensive neuropsychological test batteries following the same people over such a long time period, over 3 measurements. So we think it is important to have a look at the development of individuals and how depression can actually influence individuals' lives. Because it is depression is a great societal burden, and it's not only concerning the individuals, and as I said, also the families around it and the society in general. So it is important to have a look at what is actually happening and what can we do to help people to perform better in everyday life when they are depressed. Yes, but so this was a bit about the background about my project, but I would like to also show you something about the results, what we found already. And this is just preliminary. We are, as I said, not totally done with the data collection, so we are still in the process of analyzing data. But I had a look at the data in May, June, and I presented some of the findings at a conference in Chicago this year. And I would like to show you what we found so far. And here it is, we look at executive functions and processing speed in adults and what role depression and childhood trauma plays in this. So adverse childhood experiences or childhood trauma, or also we call it ACE, it has been linked to impaired cognition and increased risk for later psychopathology, such as major depressive disorder, for example. And ACEs can happen everywhere, but ACEs, so adverse childhood experiences, they are known to be able to alter brain functions and also have negative physical or mental consequences up into adulthood. And this chronic or toxic stress can alter the brain, and depression, anxiety, early onset dementia, or substance abuse, or even heart disease are more common the more ACEs somebody has experienced. And also the same counts for depression, which is known to negatively influence cognitive function and especially memory functions. So you can imagine that people experiencing a lot of childhood trauma, such as neglect or abuse, household dysfunction, that they will have a higher probability of developing clinical depression later in life. And that is also why we need to understand the interaction between depression and ACE, as they often are connected, to actually understand what is causing what. So our research questions were, how do ACEs and depression impact executive functions, processing speed, and working memory in adults? And are there interaction effects between ACE and depression? So this is a bit overwhelming flowchart of the whole project. We are not going into detail on all of it, but if anybody is interested in how we recruited for the project back then, this is it. I would like to have a look at the last part, the T3. So this is my data collection, and this is part of the data which I am presenting right now. So as part of this study, we had 91 participants, all adults, age range from 36 to 74, with a mean age of 55. And those participants were divided into 3 groups as well, as I said in the beginning. So those who were currently depressed, those who had a previous depression, and those who never had been depressed. And this is a cross-sectional study, so we only look at the data of the last assessment, so the T3 assessment. And we had a look at executive functions, working memory, processing speed, and also had a self-report of ACE. So what did we find? We first had a look at the different ACE groups. So we divided the participants into 3 different groups. Those who never had any childhood adverse experiences, those who had 1 or 2 childhood experiences, and those who had 3 or more adverse childhood experiences. Between these 3 groups, we did not find any significant differences. So when they were doing the psychological and neuropsychological tests, such as memory tests and intelligence tests, etc., they did not differ between the groups. We also did not find any interaction effect between ACE and depression. What we did find was that when we divided them into these 3 groups, the never depressed, the previously depressed, and the depressed group, and did not include the childhood trauma, then the currently depressed participants performed significantly worse on working memory tasks compared to never depressed individuals. So those who are in a current depression have problems with working memory compared to those who never had any depression. So the key findings are that there was a significant main effects of current depression on working memory, but not between the ACE groups. The currently depressed participants performed worse than never depressed participants, and there was no significant difference between previously depressed and never depressed individuals. And also working memory, so how much information we can keep in storage at the same time, is a critical component of fluid intelligence, and is also enabling individuals to hold and manipulate information in real time. And as working memory is kind of a part of intelligence, also influencing intelligence, it contributes to how we access our knowledge. And this also in turn is influenced by depression. So there is this connection between these 3. So again, depression, but not childhood trauma, was linked to poorer working memory in our sample. And this also suggests that depression may impair cognitive function, and that some variation in working memory may overlap with the ACE effects. And as I said, working memory is a key component of intelligence. Also, we did not find the ACE effect, and possible explanation might be that in this sample, there was low ACE exposure. There weren't that many people who had a lot of childhood trauma. Also, the sample was highly educated and might have some resilience. So it might also be important in future research to differentiate between trauma types to see what kind of trauma is influencing what. So our findings suggest that depression may temporarily impair components of intelligence, such as working memory, which are crucial for problem solving and adaptability. And as I said, we only found this for the currently depressed, but not the formerly depressed group, which could also mean that only a current state of depression blocks access to good working memory functions, and that having had a depression former in life, then you might go back to normal functions afterwards. So this is important, and also a research question we want to have a closer look at when we look at the longitudinal data, to have a look if something changes. Do we get our brain functions back after we get healthy from a depression, for example? So this is something interesting. I think we need to look at further. Some limitations and future directions. Although this is a clinical sample, it is a small sample size for a cross-sectional study, and we also have low ACE prevalence in this sample. And as I said, this is a longitudinal study, so we don't know actually much about who dropped out from T1 to T2 to T3. Is there a systematic dropout? Are those who are suffering the most from a depression dropping out, or are those coming back? We need to have a look at this. Also, we have a quite homogeneous sample. Most of them are highly educated Norwegian adults. A lot of people were recruited from a student sample, so we have a lot of people who are highly educated, and a homogeneous sample. And also for future research, it would be good to have a larger or more diverse sample to have a look at this, and also explore moderators like different trauma types, resilience, and also socioeconomic background. So to sum it up, depression, but not adverse childhood experiences, impacts working memory in this sample. Participants with a current depression showed significantly lower scores on working memory tasks compared to never depressed individuals, indicating that depression influences working memory abilities. And there are some implications for understanding the relationship between mental health and cognitive functioning. Also, our findings suggest that especially working memory among the executive functions is influenced negatively by depression. And ACEs alone may not predict impairment in highly educated samples, and indicate the need to explore executive functions in samples with different socioeconomic background and also higher prevalence of ACEs than we could find in our sample. So let me return to our two people in the beginning, where I asked you to imagine two people, one with a depression and one without. They have the same education, they have the same background, they have the same job, but one of them developed depression. So what my study actually suggests is that depression can affect cognitive functions, such as working memory, and even when background factors are the same. But also, if you have a look at this image, the two paths are going into two different directions, but we do not know if they might meet again in the forest somewhere behind the trees. So most depressions are temporary, and working memory functions might go back to normal afterwards. and that is actually, as I said, one of the main problems we want to investigate more when having a look at the longitudinal data, to have a look if memory functions are worse afterwards, or if they are actually going back to normal. And that was it. Thank you for your attention. I'll leave you my email address here for future questions, and also a link to our project website. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. That was very interesting. We don't have a lot of questions yet. One asked, what is a test battery? Maybe you can just say a few words about that.
What is a test battery? Yeah, a test battery is actually just a collection of different tests. So it sounds a bit like fireworks, but it's just a collection of tests we are using.
Exactly. But also very, very interesting that well, I may be sort of, I don't know if I'm stretching the results a bit, but it seems that our brain is very flexible, and it can take some beating and still go back to whatever is normal afterwards. But I don't know if that's going a bit too far, but it seems pointing a bit in that direction, I would say.
Yeah, we hope so, at least. Yeah.
Okay, we actually got one more question. I think we might as well take them now. We might have more at the end after Petri's presentation, but since we have questions now, I think let's go. One question is, how big is the cognitive decline due to depression? Did you measure this, and did you measure the severity of the depression?
Yeah, we measured the severity of depression. We have a clinical interview, so we have a long interview with every individual. So we are looking at every person in detail and what they are suffering from, and how long. We have not divided them into different severity groups yet, but it might be at some point when we look at the data. And the other question, the first question was,
how much of a cognitive decline was there due to depression? How big was it? Have a
it's kind of difficult to say. It depends, but the overall literature says that there is a cognitive decline, which is probably, as you also said, a bit flexible, which might come back when the depression gets over. And we only found this for working memory function. So this is actually just for keeping things in storage, which makes sense somehow, because your brain is in a different state. When you have a depression, it might be a bit foggy. You have other things on your mind than actually keeping important information in your frontal cortex or in your mind to have access to.
There was another question here that says, what about being depressed, but if you have getting chemical treatment? I assume they mean medicine, but
yeah. We don't control for that, so we have people being on medication when they come, and they might still perform worse than you would expect. So usually medication only helps with mood. So you have a stable mood, but still you might be struggling from memory function problems.
Absolutely. Yes. I was also, you said yourself that the sample is, you have a very homogeneous sample of relatively highly educated participants. I would also assume then that probably the average intelligence is maybe a bit higher than 100, or
yeah, probably we don't have a full IQ set, so we don't get a full scale intelligence score for them, but most of them are scoring over average on most of the tests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have one more question here. Are there similar recent studies about long-term memory and retrieval rates from the memory? I assume the question is about if you know of other studies that are looking at the same thing.
Um, yeah, we have some. One of my fellow researchers from Bergen, who I listed in the beginning, she's also looking at something like this, also depression and long-term effects. But she's looking at patients who are in hospital. For example, so she has smaller samples and looking at people who are suffering more than those people we have, because we have people who are, kind of functioning normally, most of them in everyday life. So there are studies, of course, and there are longitudinal studies and a lot of studies in this field. But I can have a list. I can look up some names and papers.
Yeah, I mean, we're not expecting you to provide a full list of literature.
No.
Okay, I have one question here also. I don't know if this is a bit technical, but welcome to Mensa. Why still using the version 3 of Vice, the Vice?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question, because it is a longitudinal study and we started in the 90s. So we are in our clinic here at the university. We are using the new version of Vice, but we use the old version because we need to compare to the old results from the first assessments. And then back then, Vice 4 wasn't there yet.
Okay, well, that seems like a very good reason to me.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I don't see any new questions coming in, so I think maybe we should say thank you for now, if you will hang around, and then maybe we can have a little catch up at the end, and then I will ask Petri to join us with his presentation.
So would Karen stop sharing the screen perhaps, and we'll see how it goes?
I'm trying. Let's see.
All right, pretty cool. So let me know when I am supposed to be starting, I guess.
I think you can just go ahead, Petri.
Okay. All right, so stop me if I'm doing something wrong, or if
I think maybe if we're seeing your presenter view, can you somehow, do you think you can get to your full screen view? I mean, it's not a big deal, but it's
okay.
let's see. Give it a go.
So
it's funny with these things. Anyways, just try sharing. It's fine. We can it's just that we can see with your.
right. So is
There
there
you
a difference now?
Yeah, thank you very much. That's
Okay,
perfect.
very cool. I did it. I was a technical genius in the Mensa
Yes,
Society.
congratulations.
Hooray, hooray. Well, this is a little bit awkward because I can't see you guys out there, but I'll hope you'll indulge me for some 15-20 minutes here. I won't be able to present as well as Karen, I don't think. She did a nice scientific presentation of a single study. I chose to package or perhaps give my talk on another level. I would like to summarize my experience from the last maybe 5 or 10 years of studying intelligence and the nature of psychological intelligence. So here we go. My name is Petri Kajonius. I'm a personality researcher at Lund University, and I have the privilege of actually being much in media and being able to present the power of individual differences in terms of intelligence and personality. So I'm sort of going to summarize what I've seen when it comes to the link between intelligence and personality. And we have a podcast out there for anyone who gets interested in the subject. We even have a small book if anyone is going to be interested in the Big Five model and all its strengths and all its flaws, right? I actually had my first doctoral student presenting his thesis at the University of Turku. and it was about the measurement of dark traits. And we actually had some really interesting findings there. So before you think, oh my God, who is this person? Is this like a media freak or something? Rest assured, I am a boring scientist like most other people at the university. So I've been doing this for maybe 10 years now. And if you look at the publication list here for the last year or so, we have some cutting edge research on psychedelic experiences. It seems that some people are benefited much from that. We have some interesting research on the power of personality when it comes to depression, when it comes to mental health, for instance. There we go. Or even when it comes to elderly care or gynecology or emergency care. So our entire research field centers around the power of personality and individual differences. So here we go. What am I about to spend the next 15 to 20 minutes on? Well, I'm going to talk to you about the two most fundamental, arguably fundamental constructs in psychology. And with help of these two constructs, you can actually understand much of the world. And you can understand much of how people operate. And you can understand much of life outcomes in individual lives, right? So the particular thing that I'm going to talk to you about is how intelligence is interacting or is linked with personality throughout life. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Big Five model therein. So what is personality to start with? And just take 15 seconds and try to let the screen talk to you. First of all, personality is usually summarized in the Big Five. What is the Big Five? It's 5 huge umbrella concepts in terms of openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And actually, believe it or not, with help of these 5 constructs, most of our regularities in affect, behavior, and cognition is captured. It's pretty amazing. Who would ever believed that personality can be summarized in 5 scales, perhaps? I wouldn't, at least, and I don't believe in much actually, but it seems workable. And what is so interesting is that it's fairly stable over life. 50% of the variance between you and I, or me and Karen, or me and Janne, or somebody, is driven by our individual genetics. And what is even more surprising is that the home environment seems to relay close to 0% of explanations to our ultimate personalities. And now we're talking normal cases. We're not talking abnormal homes. We're not talking deviations. We're not talking psychopathology. We're talking normal Big Five traits. So that's pretty remarkable. And only about 17% of our fluctuations in these 5 traits are not stable over lifetime. So you can arguably say that you exchange 1/5 of your total personality after the age of 20 or so. After the age of 20 or 25, most genes are online when it comes to your personality. And then the fourth little point here is that dimensional personality test seems to work reasonably well. I mean, people are lying, people don't know themselves, people have agendas, people misunderstand, etc. It's fine. But they seem to work reasonably all right. Much better than typologies, at least. So that's personality for you. That's just the groundwork. But what is intelligence ultimately in psychology or individual research? Well, we talk about the G factor. And what is the G factor? It's the common core or the common variance across all mental abilities. So if you're good at physics or maths and not so good at verbal, pretty good at spatial, pretty good at memory recall, whatever is mutual from that battery of tests that we talked about in the chat previously, that would be considered the core of intelligence in our field, right? And the G factor is even more stable than personality. And the G factor is even more heritable and genetically driven than personality. And the home environment actually produces a little bit of variance, at least, to your future intelligence levels. So whenever you measure somebody, say at age 30, there might be a certain explanation, a proportion of explanation still left from the family home, while with personality there usually is not. And finally, you can measure intelligence rather well. It has the highest reliability, which is a psychometric measurement of quality in the social sciences. So there you go. That's intelligence and personality for you in a few minutes. So how do these interact in life? How does your G factor and your big 5 traits interact in life? What is the link? What is the descriptive link? What is the correlation? How do they walk hand in hand? And I'm going to give you 3 examples. So this is not going to be a long, boring lecture, I hope. 3 examples. The first example is from an incredible meta-analysis with 38 longitudinal studies. And it's humbly called The Power of Personality. And it was some 20 years ago, and they measured children's personality and intelligence, and then they returned to the same children when they were grown up to see what had come out of their lives. And they measured their personality and intelligence again, right? And this little graph gives you the power of socioeconomic status at home, the power of your parents' income, the power of your own IQ levels, and the power of your big 5 traits when it comes to occupational outcomes. You know, some people become bankers, some become bank robbers, some become astronauts, some people become mechanics, some people become academics, etc., etc. What might predict this? Well, the lowest predictor seems to be socioeconomic status from the family home. And the biggest predictor when it comes to occupation seems to be the infamous IQ factor, intelligence, or even the G factor, like we call it, right? And personality is not far behind. And this is very typical when it comes to performance outcomes in life. If we're looking at well-being outcomes in life, then usually personality supersedes the G factor. It seems that the G factor might not have too much to do with subjective well-being, while personality has a lot to do with well-being, right? So IQ and personality is imperative for what your life is going to look like. Pretty cool. It catches my interest a little bit at least, right? So what might cause these life outcomes? Well, I would suggest that emotional intelligence, the ability or disposition to handle people all right throughout life. You'll never get away from people, trust me. So you better handle people with respect and, safety and maybe humor and humility or whatever, right? And it seems that the construct of emotional intelligence is made up of G and personality. It's made up of IQ and the big 5. How interesting. Well, what are you telling me? Well, I'm telling you that meta-analysis shows an estimate of 0.30 in correlation between IQ and emotional intelligence. And every single row here is a single study, right? And this estimate here is basically the average of all the studies in the field at this point in time, which was some 20 years ago. So obviously today we have more studies, but I'm just going to show you that having a very high IQ does not mean empirically that you're doomed to autism, or you can't look people in the eye, or you behave weird. Quite the opposite. It seems that there is a positive correlation between emotional intelligence and this infamous G factor. Again, intelligence interacting with personality throughout life. And then the last little example here. When you walk through life, creativity, having ideas is very important. To what extent does intelligence and personality interact these creative abilities? And this is a fantastic study in Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. One of the best professors in Europe, if I were to argue, Christian Candler, he's doing extensive twin studies, for instance. I've met most of these, Lars and Frank, and these are great researchers in my opinion. And if we look at creativity throughout life, we have the activities, and then we have the results. And check this out. IQ predicts creative achievements by 0.30. And of course, these are standardized estimates, so they move from 0 to 1. So 0.30 is pretty strong in psychology, actually, believe it or not. But what happens to creative activities? What predicts that? Well, openness, ladies and gentlemen. The big 5 factor of being open to change, open to new ideas, open to values, open to experiences, right? And look at this staggering estimate, 0.48. So without going too deep into this, it seems that IQ and openness are friends somehow when it comes to creative things in life, at least. Food for thought. What does this mean? Well, it means that these are the 2 fundamental constructs to what your life is going to look like. And you're like, hey, I was schooled in sociology. I mean, surely there is more than individual differences. Surely there are power structures. Surely there are cultures. Surely there are happenstances. Surely there are politics. Surely there is pure bad luck. Yes, yes, yes. That's why these estimates are not perfect. 0.29, it's a meager 10% of explained variance. 0.48, it's a meager 25% of variance. You square these estimates, right? So obviously there's a lot of things unexplained here. But what is so cool is that you carry the features that is actually going to have phenotypical impact on your life. And you're like, well, doesn't life impact our personality and IQ? Yeah, but just a little bit, as you remember. Overall, personality was pretty stable, 80%. Overall, intelligence was pretty stable, 90% throughout, right? So surely life sculptures our individual differences, but just a little bit. All right, we're getting to the end here pretty slowly but surely. Now I'm going to show you the final, conclusive, end, scientific, I'm kidding, results of how intelligence is linked to personality. Funfair. Here we go. Isn't this beautiful? Science is sexy. Somebody published all the meta-analytic relationships between all aspects of personality and all aspects of intelligence. And they published this in one of the finest journals in the world, pretty recently, PNAS, Proceeding of National Academy of Sciences. And I chose to show you just a corner of the 3,700 relationships between intelligence and personality. And I chose to show you how openness relates to general mental ability, which is the infamous intelligence construct that I've been talking about all throughout. And the relationship between general mental ability and openness is 0.26. So there is close to 10% variance overlap between IQ and Big Five. And then you're like, well, that doesn't sound like too much. Well, think about one person, think about 10 person, think about 100 person, think about 1,000 person, think about 1,000,000 person, think about 10 million persons. All of a sudden that 10% is going to be a powerful signal in how you perceive social life and how you perceive individuals. And check this out. That 0.40, that's a staggering 16% overlap. So openness and creativeness to ideas seem to be directly linked to IQ levels with individuals. Well, I might getting the hang of this. How interesting. So you can actually quantify something as sophisticated as a psychological constitution on an individual level between personality and intelligence. I think they collected over 180 different ways of measuring aspects of intelligence and personality in this particular study. And I won't bore you with going through many details, but remember that this is one Big Five factor of the 5, and this is just part of the intelligence measurements. So I'm just showing you a tiny corner of this super matrix. And then you're like, I want to hear more. I want to know more. Tell me. Then I'll just tell you. The reading tip for tonight is to go and find this paper on scholargoogle.com. Scholargoogle.com obviously just searches and looks for scientifically peer-reviewed papers, or at least established academic literature, right? And if you type this into Scholar Google, you'll find a PDF, and you'll have a blast tonight, maybe even a couple of nights, because you can for yourself detect what's going on between personality and intelligence, and you can map that and reflect that upon your own life, if you care, if you don't have anything to do, so to speak. So are there any negative relationships between IQ and openness? Well, there is a tiny minuscule negative one. What does that mean? The more apt you are for quantitative reasoning, that is deciphering and defragmenting your social world, the more you're inclined to do that, the less you're inclined to appreciate aesthetics. It's just a tiny correlation, so don't make too much out of it. But some of you are wondering, why are some red and why are some green? Well, the red are opposite relationships and the green are adjacent and co-varying relationships, right? So anyway, I am just excited about psychology, I guess. There are so many aspects of it, like learning and memory, different memories, fluencies, creativities, how retrieval access, memory spans. There is so many cool things to be looking at in individuals. So we need to learn to celebrate one another's differences, in my opinion. So here we go. There was 79 different personality scales, and there was 97 different cognitive ability constructs. Not too bad. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Denise. That was a really cool job. I'll never master that amount of work myself. All right. Last slide here or so. Some of you are wondering, I thought this was sponsored by the Nordic Mensa Fund. I haven't heard too much about Mensa. What are you doing here anyway, Petri? Well, the reason I'm here is basically I was privileged enough to work with a super nice team down in Lund. Shout out to all 3 of you. And we were able to gather this particular data, intelligence and personality, from the Swedish Mensa. And that was pretty cool. And the question arises, all these things that you've been speaking about tonight for the last 20 minutes, Petri, does it hold for Mensa members as well? Does it hold for the higher normal distribution end, usually 130 plus, usually 2 standard deviations above the population mean? Is the link between personality and intelligence the same with that particular folks? And the answer is yes, yes, yes. There's nothing indicated that there would be a linear trend break. Everything, even genetic data, shows that the linearity found with IQ measurements seems to hold even at the upper end of 2 and 3 standard deviations. And we did find, indeed, that the Mensa sample had higher openness, like half a standard deviation, and higher honesty humility. But I don't know what's going on. I think this is sample driven. I think the ones who chose to answer our survey had extra high honesty humility. That's my guess. But I don't know. Maybe there is something representative about honesty humility. Should it really be higher with Mensa members? I doubt it. But the empirical data, at least for 353 Mensa members, shows. I don't know. Give us an email, give us a call or something, and let's talk about the study. So if you do get interested in this subject, if you're getting excited in personality's clothing upon the powerful G factor, right? Then please visit Personlighetspodden at Spotify or Acast or wherever. We're talking about stuff like this all the time. And if you get really bored, check out Sveriges Television, Swedish Television's new Spelet. If you want to see a portrayal of intelligence and personality under pressure, it's one of those typical game shows, right? However, Håkan Juholt, almost our former prime minister, his intelligence is very interesting. And Samir here, a panel participant, his personality is super interesting. And Gry Forssell here, her intelligence and personality is beautifully matched. And this guy, we have no idea what he's doing there. He's just commenting or something. Or he's at least enjoying individual differences, I should say. So Spelet is every weekend for the entire fall. I won't make too much advertisement. I really love this. This is my passion, actually. To quantify correlations, to understand what the world looks like, to understand all these rather difficult causalities, or I should say covariations that is out there. There are genetic correlations behind this table. Openness and intelligence do correlate genetically, and that is driving most of these correlations, if you're wondering. So thank you very much. I was happy to give this little talk to you, and I hope you have a fantastic night and that you enjoy yourself, your traits, and your cognitive abilities. That is my wish for you, actually.
Thank you so much, Petri. That was super interesting. And I think as a Mensa member and as someone who has met literally hundreds of Mensans, I can recognize a lot in what you said. Actually, the openness, if I may comment, if you equate that to also the trait of curiosity, I think actually that was one of the most, once I joined Mensans, I found that this is one of the most striking aspects to me, is that curiosity is a big factor.
Wow,
that's
cool.
That's my personal opinion. People want to know, they want to investigate, they will Google the answers when you're having a discussion, stuff
There
like
you
that.
go.
So
Yeah.
I think that one, at least I personally can recognize that a lot from the Mensa members I've been hanging out with. About the honesty and humility, well, yes, some are not so humble, but a lot of people are. Anyways, this was super interesting, and I'm definitely going to listen to Personlighedspodden. That sounds very interesting.
Very cool.
Yeah. Let's see if we have any questions coming in. I actually have a couple myself, but we'll start with this one. Aren't Mensans a biased group of the highly gifted, since there's a selection effect in several stages? 1, you have to take an IQ test. 2, you have to join Mensa. And 3, you have to stay in Mensa after having seen what it's all about.
Yeah.
So we're probably a bit of a special group here.
Yeah, of course. I mean, certainly there is bias. There is bias in every polling, in every survey. The participation rate was only 23% in this particular Mensa study. Certainly. The only thing I can add is that it's very rare that estimates totally shift or totally tilt due to survey biases. I mean, maybe we see that occasionally in elections in United States or so, but then it's so close already, right? And in these matters, we pretty much know what we're doing since 50 or 100 years of research. So we sort of know how to quantify our bias. So obviously this M4TR4S1. Obviously, you're correct.
Okay. So yeah, another question. Have you touched on whether high IQ, Mensa, affects people's ability to control the bad traits of their personality?
What a good question. I mean, that is a favorite thesis of mine. I actually anecdotally believe that there are more psychological resources following high intelligence levels to do exactly that. However, there is not too much data proving this. There is not too much empirical research. It's sort of difficult to set up an experiment or a study testing these hypotheses because so much is self-report anyway. So how do you actually cloak your personality cleverly and convincingly? But I tend to believe that though. So power dude, my man, but let's do a study.
Yeah. I mean, you would think that people would be better at manipulating or wearing masks or whatever. Okay, this is a funny one. Considering Mensa to be a social organization that exists as a psychological support group, yeah, that's the case. Can you please comment on intelligence as a curse?
Whoa.
Some people think intelligence is a curse.
Yeah, wow. Well, if I may offend somebody just jokingly, whenever somebody says, my intelligence is so high that I'm depressed. We're all depressed. It's a rough life, and the empirical data mostly show that intelligence is a protective factor. It's not a curse. It actually creates more opportunities to get out of your rut. However, there is a single study or two out there that shows that having high IQ while battling depression might have certain challenges following it. There might be a slightly higher reality testing when you're depressed, and that would be accentuated by high IQ, and it could make it temporarily worse. But I don't know about curse. I mean, Karen or somebody maybe knows more in this particular case, but I'm a little bit doubtful. A little bit. Allow me.
Yeah. Well, it can be, yeah. I think some people just wish sometimes that they didn't have to overthink everything. I think maybe that's the key problem.
Maybe.
Anyways, I can't say what's behind the question. So let's take the next one. Openness is correlated with cognitive ability. Is any finding how persons are more open when they encounter people of the same level of intelligence as compared to a highly different variation? I guess it's we open up better.
Wow.
Same level.
That is a cool question again. I mean, an intelligent question. There's so many things to say about that. I mean, obviously, social psychology-wise, we trust people that are more like ourselves. So that goes without saying. There is a small effect there. But if it's actually true, again, there is a lack of studies operationalizing just this very hypothesis, and I'm excited to see it. And I would encourage my master students down at Lund University to try something like this out, because it's quite intriguing. The only thing I can say is that I know of a study where if in a working team or in a working environment, if there is a bigger than a 20 IQ point gap between certain members, that is more than one standard deviation, then communication gets a little bit tricky. And you can argue that communication is an intricate part of openness, and that openness would be closing unless you don't understand each other at the same level. So there is something to the question, but there is not too much empirical evidence.
Yeah. I actually have a question of my own, because emotional intelligence is sometimes a bit of a touchy subject in Mensa, and people don't maybe either choose not to believe in it or say that it's not relevant, or some say they struggle. I found it really interesting that meta study found that there is actually a correlation between IQ and EQ.
Yeah.
So
Sure. And to me that's self-evident. To me, emotional intelligence is nothing but personality and a little bit of G. So emotional intelligence is basically your levels of the big five and how those operate towards other people. And having a higher IQ or higher intelligence levels, you should be able to absorb your surroundings better. And it should automatically bump up your traits, your social traits a little bit. So the EQ and the IQ correlation is not controversial. However, calling something emotionally intelligent is a little bit controversial.
Exactly. I think that's probably the main issue. By the way, how do you measure emotional intelligence? How do you measure the EQ?
Yeah, there are several ways, but one common one is to just have people self-report a bunch of items. They basically look like personality items. They are like, do you approach a stranger at the party and say hi, or do you quickly understand somebody's being sad in the working team, or stuff like that, right? But then there is ability-based emotional intelligence tests as well, where you actually see pictures of faces and you're supposed to read their faces. What kind of emotion do they carry? So you have both ability and both dispositional self-reporting intuitions about it, and those two are sort of different in their nature. So again, emotional intelligence, it's difficult, you know. I'd rather stick with personality and the G factor myself.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's say, I think we are drying up with the questions here a bit. Actually, there was one question a bit further up that we got before, which was actually for Karen. Maybe we should just get that on the table. Karen, the question was if you only tested for working memory functions, or did other mental functions not go into decline for the depressed participants?
We tested all of them, these four different factors, and it was only working memory which was significantly different. All of the others were the same for the three groups.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Seems to be a new one. Okay. Here's a tricky one. I'll give it to both of you then. What are the best contemporary psychological theories that define cognitive functions, intelligence, or giftedness? I'm not sure I even understand the question myself, but if you have something, please go ahead.
Yeah, so you want to try, Karen, something?
I'm not quite sure if I have a good answer to to that one because it's so complex, and psychology itself has so many theories and is developing all the time that I cannot. I couldn't answer like this is the defining theory. I don't know if you have any
Is it
up-to-date
changing,
thoughts.
or are we still going with the, what we've done? You said the meta studies you referred to are 20 years old. I mean, how has the field evolved? Are there new things?
Well, the field is evolving toward neuroscience and cognitive neuroscience, and obviously there are many biological markers and correlates to IQ and intelligence. It could be ionization of the myelin sheaths. It could be certain morphological things like the size of certain lobes. It could be the connectivity of the executive functions in the front, communicating with the motor sensory cortex towards the back. So to me, the G theory, or the G factor, summarizing the mutual variance from different mental abilities, seems to be the best way to at least capture the workings of the brain, if you see what I mean. And then you can, of course, have infinite levels of analysis on the brain. You can go into the synapses or the neurotransmitters, or how the different lobes talk to one another, etc., 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 right? So the G factor, it's called G because it's the general factor. It's the overlapping variances of the different test batteries, so to speak. It's the core of IQ. It's whatever you can't train. It's what's there. It's highly genetically driven, up to 80% in many studies. I even saw a study yesterday where the G factor had 87% heritability. So there you go. It's kind of hard to just change your entire brain like this, right?
Yeah. The G factor is, what is that? The basis of all the abilities or many of the abilities that we have.
Yeah, I guess.
Anyways, I think this is a good place to round this off. Thank you so much to both of you, Petri and Karen, for two very, very interesting takes on one very specialized and one very broad, and lots of interesting perspectives on that. So thank you to the audience for the good questions. And I think we will say thank you for this year, and we will be back hopefully in 2026 with new interesting presentations. So
Totally. Personality, everyone.
personality. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Actually, I don't know. Are we still on? I should probably show my little donate thingy here. So
we should wait some 30 seconds before we put something personal up, I think.
I'm not putting anything personal up. I'm just showing you. Okay.